Okay, so we have the bodice done with our collar and our lining, and I got all the tucks done. Everything's ready to go. So the next thing is the skirt that goes on this little dress. Okay, so I went ahead and worked on the skirt, and the first thing, gotta turn this around. First thing I did was my side seams. Okay, and I did nice French seams. Okay, it's a wonderful way to finish off these seam edges. It doesn't create a lot of bulk. Well, a little bit more bulk, but not terrible. It looks great, and it's nice and comfortable inside, and it's a really high quality way to sew your seams, especially on children's wear, or anything that's kind of opaque, see-through. Okay, now this is a mid-weight fabric, so the French seams work good. If I had a really heavy fabric, I would not do French seams. But, okay, so I have this side seam done. Now center back seam, I am not going to sew. I'm going to do that later after I finish off the waist seam. Because if I leave this open, then I can use our burrito method to finish off this seam with the lining to totally enclose that seam. So I've sewed the side seam in a French seam, and I've sewn this side seam in a nice French seam. Okay? The next thing I did is I went ahead and put the basting stitches in. Okay, and what I did is I did this back, half of the back with my basting stitches, and I did 4 millimeters, and I did it at 1/4, 1/2, and 3/4. So I did my 3 rows of basting in preparation to put the skirt on and have gathers. Now, very important, on this side, where my zipper goes, I'm going to be folding this back 5/8, and I'm going to be sewing this on a zipper. So I don't want gathers here where I sew it on at like 3/8. I want my gathers to start after the zipper. So I have left 1 1.25 inches, okay, which is 2 seam allowances. I've left the 1.25 inches with no gathers, and then I started up right at that 1.25 inches. Okay, so that's what I did, and I went ahead and did 3 rows right here, and then I stopped. Okay, so I broke, or I cut my thread and started over, because when I pull up these gathers, this is a good amount to pull up. Then I did the center, I did the whole front piece in one. So that'll be a little trickier, but I can pull up my gathers from both ends, and I didn't want to break them there because I want this to be consistent gathers all across the front. But then at this other side seam, I went ahead and stopped my stitching, and then I started again and did my 3 rows on the back half, the other back half, and again, I left 1.25 inches, 2 seam allowances, so that I can put in my zipper without worrying about gathers bothering it. Okay, so we've done that. The next thing now is to pin my skirt to the bodice. To pin it, first I pin it where I want it to go, then I will pull up my basting threads to get my gathers. Okay, so what we're going to do is we need to do right sides together. So here's the skirt portion. Here's the bodice portion right here. And now I'm going to turn this so it's right sides together. And here's my skirt portion. So the first thing I'm going to do is start pinning where these edges meet. Okay, and I've got some pins here. And I'm going to put them here because I'll need quite a few. So I'm going to take my side seam and I'm going to match it up with this side seam. Now, I have my 3 tucks here, but my seam is underneath the tuck. So I'm just going to kind of pull these out of the way. And I'm going to match up my 2 side seams. Okay, so that's, whoops. Oh. Okay, so that's where that goes. And I'm going to pin this so that when I take the pin kind of bite out of the fabric, I do it right where my seam allowance is. Okay, I'm actually going to put this over here so my arm doesn't get in the way. Okay, the next thing is I'm going to now take this edge and I'm going to put this along the center back. So I'm lining up my 2 center backs. I will put on my zipper after I get this seam done. Okay, so there's that. So now look at this. I have this many gathers to go in this little space. So this is a very, very gathered skirt. But it's not uncommon for children's, little girls' dresses to be extremely full and gathered. So if you think about this, here's this distance, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's almost a 4-to-1 ratio. So that's a lot. And I want to distribute it evenly and get all my gathers evenly distributed along this edge. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to put my pins together to find the middle of this, of the gathered part. And once I find the middle, I'm going to put a pin there, and then I'm going to do that again. I'm going to put these two edges together, fold it to find the middle of that section. So basically what I'm doing is I'm taking that section and I'm dividing it into fourths. Okay? So that I can then pin it together. Is it better to do this? Okay. All right, so here's our gathering section, and I've got 1, 2, 3 pins, so I've marked it in fourths. Now I'm going to take the little skirt part, and I'm going to find the middle part there, okay, and I'll put a pin right here, okay, and then I'm actually going to find the fourths again. I'll put those two pins together. Now this becomes very small, but we know there's a lot of gathers going in that area, so I want to mark that. And then here's this area, okay, and I'm going to put a pin in there. Okay, so now I've got this totally marked off. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the middle pin to the middle pin, and I'm going to put those two together and pin those two together. Okay, then I'm going to take these two pins and match them up, and of course I'll get rid of a pin and just use the one. And remember, I'm also putting my pin in right where I'm planning to sew at about 5/8. So it's between that 1/2 inch and the 3/4 of the basting lines. So now I'm going to match those two pins up together and then pin those. Okay, so if you look at this, can you see how funny that looks? I've got my non-gathered edge pinned to my gathered edge in equal increments. And now I'm actually ready to pull up my gathers.